Holy shit, are we shooting a video? All right. You know, earlier today when I first tweeted out that I was going to do this video, which, by the way, I actually am a lot more active on Twitter and stuff now, so make sure to follow me there as well as subscribe to this channel right here, watching this video. One of the things that people asked me right away when I said I was doing this is, do you think this is the direction that Nintendo and Game Freak is going to go? That all future games are going to follow this style where they start off with cut national dexes and eventually they re-add them in DLC? And I think, yeah, it honestly makes a lot of sense to me. It cuts down a lot of the initial production for launching the base version of the game. They can focus on just making the best possible version of this new area to explore, and then as time goes by, they rebuild on top of it, making it so that, yeah, you can bring in all those past favorites, allowing it to, again, focus on the core game at launch and expand into that full experience as time goes by. Now, if you don't know exactly what's going on, basically they've announced a season pass that contains 2 pieces of DLC that are adding new areas you can go to in the games, new storylines to follow, more Pokemon to catch, and is re-adding a lot of Pokemon that were initially cut from Sword and Shield. And there's a few reasons why that kind of rubs people the wrong way. But before I get too in-depth on it, one thing I really want to emphasize is that the fact that Pokemon is adding this DLC is something that they are doing instead of the traditional third version or Gen 0.5 sequel. What I mean by that is that normally after a Pokemon game comes out, sometime later, maybe within a year, maybe a year and a half, they release a secondary version. They did that back with the old gens with Yellow, Crystal, Emerald, Platinum, and then with Gen 5 and Gen 7, they did stuff like Black and White 2 and Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. X and Y was the only one that didn't really do that move. And normally what that forces people to do is that if they're really hardcore fans, they end up buying the game at launch, they play through it, they have fun, and then they buy basically the same game but with redone plot, some extra stuff, and is, yes, a bigger and oftentimes better game, but one that is 80% the same experience. So instead of taking that approach this time around, Nintendo is instead saying, hey, you bought Sword or Shield, that's the only version you're getting, and instead now you buy a season pass that expands it instead of having to buy Sword and Shield 2 or Pokemon Gun, as a lot of people were joking. So that is, I think, really important context when we're talking about all the things happening with the season pass. So let's break down some of the specific problems. The first of which I think is really kind of the biggest thing that is upsetting a lot of people, is the entire idea of how Pokemon has approached cutting Pokemon from the game and then re-adding them in DLC. And there's a few problems with this. And I honestly think the biggest problem with it is how Game Freak and Nintendo has gone about explaining this DLC to a lot of people, because obviously it was a really huge deal back when Sword and Shield were announced that people found out, hey, the National Dex is complete, that's ridiculous, I want this Pokemon in there that's not in there, why would I play this if I can't have my favorite in here? It was a whole huge deal. And at the time, there were clarified remarks that said, hey, the Pokemon that we cut from this game are cut, they are not being added later. And here we are now, with DLC announced, that is re-adding those Pokemon. Now, it is possible that maybe they change their minds later because of the fan outcry and they're re-adding them. I really doubt that, because it honestly makes a ton of sense that the whole idea is, in this DLC, there are new areas to explore, and these are the Pokemon that are gonna show up here. Now, part of the reason people are really angry about this, some of them I think are because of a slight misunderstanding, which is the fact that, yes, you have to buy this DLC if you want to catch those Pokemon in this game. But if you don't buy the Season Pass, you can still get these Pokemon either by trading from a past game or even trading with other players who caught them in the expansion. So you're not forever limited from never getting those Pokemon, you just can't go to the areas where they're going to be made available, which is still a little weird, but it makes a lot more sense than what people were kind of initially thinking with them just being forever gone. And again, if you don't want to buy the DLC, you're still able to transport those in, which is, I think, a really good thing. And really, when you think about it, if they are taking this approach of making them available as part of DLC Islands, it makes a lot more sense that you would actually find new Pokemon that were previously unavailable in the main area that you can now catch in this new island. It'd be kind of weird if it was just all the same ones all over again. Why go to the new place? But at the same time, I do understand that frustration of why did they have to be cut from the National Dex in the first place. Really, when it comes to this specific issue, I think the biggest problem is there just should have been a little more forwardness about it. Back when people were really worried about the fact that Pokemon were being cut from the National Dex, I think it would have been a really good move for them to just be upfront about it and say, hey, yeah, we are planning to do DLC in the future for this game, and as part of that, more of those Pokemon are going to be making a return. And that would have assuaged a lot of fears that, in retrospect, were really unnecessary. Now, with this DLC, we are not getting all the Pokemon that were removed, but there is, of course, the argument that maybe after this Season Pass, there'll be another one. There's always the chance that they'll do a remake of Diamond and Pearl, and maybe there they'll add all these missing Pokemon to this generation. I think there's a very healthy chance that by the time Generation 8 games are complete, the whole National Dex is going to be back. Problem number 2, money. Now, one of the immediate perceptions a lot of people have, especially when it comes to DLC in any form, is the argument of, is this just a cash grab? Did they really have to do this? And honestly, I think especially when you compare this to situations of people buying all the games before, this is a cheaper and better situation for most people out there. I mean, if you bought every version of a game, or at least one version for each release, say back again with like Sun and Moon. Well, you bought Sun or Moon at launch, and then you bought the Ultra version a year later, or 2 years, I forget what the gap was. The point is, you end up spending basically 2 full games worth. Whereas in this situation, you're buying a full game's worth by picking up Sword or Shield, and then you're buying a season pass that is coming in at half the price. Now, the one place I've seen a few people make arguments that this is actually more money is, yes, if you never liked buying the re-releases and you just like buying one version and maybe you got another version for your friend, your sibling, whatever, and hey, now all of a sudden that is a lot more money because you're now not only both buying the base game, but now you're both buying expansions if you want to play the whole way through, which I get that, but at the same time, this is still a better situation than the full re-release way, because again, if you wanted to play that final better version of the game, well, that was going to cost you more. There's also the fact that there were some people that always didn't buy the original version and waited for the re-release, and yes, this is costing more money than that situation. But again, this is also rewarding people that actually chose to buy and play the games right away instead of being like, well, yeah, this looks cool, but I'm gonna wait for version 3.0, which is gonna be way cooler and we all know it. Now, it's just all one game, which I think is a lot better. Now, going hand in hand with this whole issue of is this just a cash grab though, is I think one of the slightly more important and worrisome questions. Was there cut content from the base game in order to make DLC something available later? And this is a very common conspiracy theory that comes up every time a game adds DLC, especially when it's part of a series that didn't previously have DLC before, and it's one that I honestly think is slightly unfounded. There has been a history of Pokemon games losing content as time goes by. Part of this is because of what developers think fans want, especially fans at large, versus what the more dedicated community necessarily wants. Sometimes it has to do with the amount of work that just goes into making the game, and as time has gone on, there are greater resources and greater things needed just to make the game in the first place. And really, if we want to talk about games that are kind of missing content, this was already established 2 generations ago. When X and Y came out, they basically had no post-game whatsoever, and with Sword and Shield, it's that same situation all over again. Now, part of this, I will admit, hinges a lot on what this content actually looks like at release, because, to be honest, yes, if this DLC all releases for this additional charge and it adds a total of 2 hours of gameplay between both of them, that's a little annoying, because that's about how much post-content you'd see in some of the games, more in some of them. Some of the games had crazy post-game content. But the point is that if this adds a very minimal amount of additional post-game content and they're charging $30 for it, that's a little annoying. But as long as this DLC is sizable in and of itself, I honestly do feel like Sword and Shield in and of itself was a complete game, and this is just going to add further to it. Again, I completely understand a lot of the frustration that's going on with this announcement, and I think a very large part of it is just in the fact that Nintendo and Game Freak did not find the best way of conveying and announcing all of this. I think there should have been a lot more forwardness early on, but at the end of the day, if the choice is between having a $30 season pass that's adding even more great content and free updates that are re-adding all those missing National Pokédex options, or having to wait a full year to buy a fully redone game that is, again, 80% the same content, this is a huge step up.